Chapter 2: Shifting Bodies, Shifting Minds. Picture yourself walking through your neighborhood. Everything looks just the same today as it did yesterday. Same buildings, same street posts, and the same crack in the sidewalk that you often trip over when you don't watch out. Samesville, USA. There's a sense of security in the familiarity. Now imagine taking that same stroll, but this time, things are slightly off kilter. At first, you can't put your finger on exactly what has changed. It's just a feeling. Then you realize that all of the buildings have shrunk, maybe an inch or two, just enough to weird you out. The next time you take a stroll, there's an even bigger change. The dry cleaner and the pharmacy have switched sides of the street. This is what it feels like to go through puberty. A teen's world seems to be shifting before his very eyes, and everything, himself, his friends, even you, looks different. It is no wonder then that your son's moods and behaviors are unpredictable. 1 second he is mature and sophisticated, and then, moments later, it's as though you have a 2-year-old. What you see on the outside is how he feels on the inside. Sometimes your teen is that sophisticate who holds opinions about world politics, and other times he is not. He'll even regress and have tantrums. Teens by nature are inconsistent. For the first time, they are beginning to develop true empathy, the ability to put themselves in someone else's shoes. Yet they are simultaneously some of the most self-centered people on the planet. Their intellectual abilities take off. An adolescent can grasp abstract concepts such as democracy and justice. It's also, however, a time when impulsivity, poor judgment, and bad choices are typically at full tilt. How, you may wonder, can any human be such a delight and then seemingly instantaneously evoke a depth of rage you never thought possible? One day you think, this kid is going to take the world by storm, and then the next you worry that he might not actually graduate from high school. Don't worry, you're not alone. Teens go through a physical, intellectual, and emotional metamorphosis. Watching your son navigate puberty is simultaneously fantastic and frightening. It's a joy to see him mature, expand his awareness, and become more independent. The changes, however, come on so rapidly that it can be unsettling for anyone involved. Not only are there the physical changes to contend with, but on a deeper level, your son is grappling with profound questions that just a few years ago would have made no sense to him, but that in a few years more must be answered if he is to make the transition from dependent child to self-reliant adult. Who am I? What do I believe in? What should I become? And do I have what it takes to get there? Although these questions might always linger to some extent, right now they are in the forefront of your teen's mind. They impact his day-to-day decision-making. An important part of adolescent development, this self-inquiry, is both exciting and overwhelming. The answers to these questions for your son are found in a variety of unexpected places. When he's hanging out with friends, reading Lord of the Flies, which he swears is boring, or even searching for a new look at the mall. Every time a teenager engages in school, in an extracurricular activity, or in risk-taking, he discovers something new about himself. However, some teens find this process of self-discovery too confusing. While they take unwarranted risks at the skate park, in school they fear that a failure or even a less than perfect outcome will expose their perceived inadequacy. This is one of the main reasons that teens opt out. Think of development like a river, and your son is stuck in an eddy. For clarification, and the sake of this analogy, an eddy is a little whirlpool formed by obstacles that spins around aimlessly. In order to help your opt-out, you need to find out where these obstacles are hiding. Your son is not lazy. Chances are that the biggest contributors to his eddy-like condition are things over which he has no control. This chapter will examine the most significant of these obstacles, the pace of his physical, cognitive, and emotional development. From childhood to adolescence. To understand what teenagers are growing into, we have to appreciate what they are leaving behind. Dr. Marcia Levy-Warren explains this in very simple terms. Children feel small in a world that is divided between the big and the small, and feel safe knowing that those who are big care for those who are small. Kids see the world through their parents' eyes. They know who they are because they know who they belong to, which team to root for, which religion to believe in, who to be just like when they grow up. Mom and dad rule because they are king and queen. Being small and feeling that their parents care about them gives children an important sense of continuity. After the first year of life, growth is gradual. Your son gets up every morning feeling he is still the same boy he was the day before. As long as there is peace, he imagines that the reign of mom and dad will endure forever. Metaphorically, childhood is like Samesville. Structure and consistency make kids feel safe. Even though an elementary school-aged boy can fantasize about eventually being an adult, he can't really imagine a life without the support and care of his parents. When my son was in 4th grade, he asked me if it was hard to get a job as a waiter. Where did this question come from? Food service had never been on his list of things to be when I grow up. Apparently, his thinking went like this. Someday I will go to college, but after that I will obviously move back home. I'll need a job because grown-ups have jobs. There is a pizzeria in my town, and I could probably work there. He even asked if it was okay to live at home until he saved enough money to buy a house in a neighborhood. That nearby house still sounds good to me. This seemed like the perfect solution for a boy who knew he would grow up but could still only see himself as forever 9 years old. To paraphrase Dorothy at the end of The Wizard of Oz, if it's not in the backyard, I don't need it. Little boys do grow and eventually become men. The thing is, however, for most of our adult lives, just as when we were kids, the aging process happens in the background. We slip into middle age and then one day realize we are old. Adolescence does not work that way. It seems to happen all at once. Although puberty actually lasts a few years, there is nothing like a little pubic hair to tell a child, you are not in Kansas anymore. The terrain of Samesville changes, seemingly overnight. Puberty interrupts a child's sense of continuity, and with it, an understanding of who he is in the world. A feeling of consistency will return once your son feels at home in his new, bigger self. He won't become a completely different person, but even you don't know what kind of adult your son is going to be. He has quite a challenge ahead of him. The 11-year-old only has to become a 12-year-old. However, the 21-year-old must become an independent adult who can get a job, raise a few kids of his own, and perhaps even make the world a better place. The survival of the species depends on it. Moving out into the world is one of life's most challenging transitions. It's decades in the making. There's a lot of riding on the shoulders of your teenager. Ambivalence. In order to be successful, your teen will have to stop depending on you the same way he did when he was younger and learn to rely on himself. As you've probably already realized, this dependency will not go down without a fight. Childhood does not gently give way to adolescence, and you will see this acted out in all manner of ways. As an early teen, at one moment he'll try to bully you into a later curfew, and in the next, he'll want to curl up beside you on the couch. Privacy will mean everything until he forgets about it and runs through the house in his underwear. And then there are the socks left all over the house, because secretly your boy still wants to be treated like that little kid who was so well cared for. However, your son also wants to believe he's outgrown you. After all, that's exactly what he tells his friends. With them, he acts big and tough. It's exciting to walk with his friends to the pizza parlor and eventually to drive places by himself. He thinks he's ready to do things that you know he's not ready to do. But at the same time, he still wants your care. Puberty is a river that separates childhood from adulthood. The bridge that crosses that river, that carries your son from the dependence to independence, is called ambivalence. The meaning of ambivalence is often misunderstood. Many think it means a lack of strong feelings one way or the other. I could go to the movies or stay home. Either way is fine with me. What it means, though, is that you concurrently have two sets of very intense and often competing feelings. I really want to go to the movies, and I really want to stay home. While it is impossible to go and stay at the same time, you can be both excited and scared about something. For instance, a new job. Ambivalence causes us to approach and retreat. Your son really wants to grow up, and he really doesn't. Ambivalence is the essence of adolescence. It will drive you crazy, and it defines almost everything your son does. Some days he will want to march proudly to the independent side of the bridge, and you will feel as proud of him as he feels about himself. Other days he will make a run for the other end. That might be wonderful if it takes the form of hugs, but not so wonderful if his ambivalence is manifested in a screaming match. Shifting bodies. The transition from dependence to independence starts with the physical changes of puberty. For your son, these changes are the first indication that he's losing the continuity he has relied on for so long. He's no longer little, though he is not quite big, and there is no way to mistake him for the child he once was. He is taller, hairier, and has started to smell. During the first 2 to 3 years of adolescence, your son's skeleton will increase by 45%, and he will accumulate 37% of his total bone mass. I have noticed teens grow bigger from one weekly therapy session to the next. Physical growth during adolescence is a haphazard affair. J. M. Tanner, whose scale became the go-to measure of sexual development, observed that a boy stops growing out of his trousers a year before he stops growing out of his jacket. Teenage boys are often clumsy because they have yet to figure out how to coordinate limbs that have grown out of proportion to their torso. For a time, a teenage boy may wear a man's shoe size, but still shop in the boys' department. Those big feet certainly get in the way. This growth spurt and the muscles that come with it will propel some boys forward on the athletic field. For others, who may have been ahead of the curve as children, an advantage is lost. These changes make an adolescent very self-conscious, in part because they are linked to sexual development, but also because they cause uncertainty. In the midst of puberty, a child is never confident he is doing it right. A 7th grader becomes an 8th grader when all of his friends do, but he may be one of the few boys in his class to have a deeper voice, or perhaps more unsettling, one of the few who does not. This new body also takes a lot more care. It needs to be deodorized, shaved, and occasionally fumigated. Steps toward independence are taken as your son begins to manage these tasks on his own. Do you still need to remind him to take a shower? Can he get up in the morning on his own? He has to reevaluate himself in light of his increased size and strength. This includes figuring out how to relate to his parents, over whom he suddenly has the advantage of a few inches. A growth spurt has a psychological impact as well. It creates a very physical barrier between your son and his childhood. He realizes for the first time that a phase of his life is over. The toddler knows he is not a baby, but he does not really recall this happening. The 5-year-old knows he can reach the sink and tie his shoes, but he does not think, my toddler days are behind me. Not so with an adolescent. It is always funny to hear teens reminisce about being children, as if it were a long time ago. To them, childhood is a very different time. Crossing the threshold into adolescence makes your son aware of something he's never noticed before, the passage of time. This opens up the possibility that life does not last forever, a devastating thought for anyone. Along with this possibility comes the daunting awareness that adulthood is just around the corner, and he'd better get a move on. There is one more change brought on by puberty, probably the most difficult one for parents to bear. Abruptly, your son does not want to talk to you anymore. He doesn't want you to come in his room to ask how school was or what his friends are up to. He'd rather stream a movie alone in his room than watch the same movie with you in the family room. A 16-year-old patient recently told me, "I have not been into my family lately. I don't really care about them or want to be with them. My dad is not like this. That bothers me because I do not want to worry about that." Up until this point, although he's had his own life, you have always shared in almost every aspect of it. You brought cupcakes to his class, spoke to his teachers, cheered his goals, and applauded his performances. You know his friends. They have probably slept at your house. Now your son wants some distance because he has a secret. He is now a sexual human being, and you are the last person he wants to know about. Any awareness of your son's sex life will come strictly by accident. Because he wants to avoid these accidents at all costs, he will shut you out as much as possible. Anthony Wolf, author of Get Out of My Life, But First Could You Drive Me and Cheryl to the Mall, wrote, "Sexuality is extremely important to the teenage male, and since he wants to keep it separate from his parents, he keeps himself separate from his parents." I witnessed a family friend grow up, largely from one Thanksgiving to the next. Somehow puberty scared his smile away. For a time, this once vivacious and friendly boy barely said a word to his family. Rarely would a laugh or even a giggle escape his wary mouth. It's as if "keep out, no trespassing" was written all over his face. Fortunately, he's grown into a warm and engaging young man with children of his own. The Cold War of parental relations does not last forever. Your son will open up again once he becomes more comfortable with his sexuality. Only then it will be as a young man who is beginning to experience a life of his own. Shifting minds. While the physical changes of puberty may create a one-way exit from childhood, it's the quantum leap his thinking takes that will ultimately help him resolve those burning questions of meaning and existence now before him. A teen's thinking skills do not just unfold or blossom, they explode. A young child's thinking is anchored in the world of the concrete. He can only apply reason to things he has experienced, touched, or seen. He tries to bring sense to things by making up theories about what he observes, but abstract concepts are beyond a child's reach. He understands the concept of country because he lives in one. He knows that America is a democracy because he has seen his parents vote. He may even understand what a monarchy is, having grown up with stories about kings and queens. However, ask a fourth grader what role free speech plays in a democracy, and you will be met with a blank stare. A bright 8th grade patient was complaining about being taunted by a boy in his class who had problems. I asked if he knew the meaning of the saying, "People who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones." He answered, "If they do, they will hit themselves. They will hit the glass and break it." On his own, my young patient could not yet extract the symbolic meaning of this idiom. However, give him a few months and his mind will make the amazing leap to abstract thought. I still remember being confounded by the notion that a pound of feathers was the same as a pound of bricks. Then one day it just clicked. Abstract thought is the gateway to conceptual thinking. Unlike a child, a teen does not have to experience something in order to understand it. He can test out the theories he forms in his head without being dependent on direct experience. These theories help him not only to better understand how things are, but also to imagine how they could be. For example, by using deductive and inductive reasoning, he can see relationships between scattered facts, even if some information is missing. With deductive reasoning, one begins with a general principle and then applies that principle to more and more specific case. All high school juniors have homework, John is a junior. Therefore, John has homework. Inductive reasoning is the opposite. It starts with the pieces and uses them to figure out the general principle. I saw 3 kids at the deli during lunch, so they must have a day off from school. These thinking skills also help teens to do something that might surprise you. Appreciate cause and effect. Of course, there will be numerous times when he is not thinking about the consequences of his behavior, like when he sneaks out in the middle of the night or drives off with an open bottle of vodka in the car. However, he is not capable of wrapping his head around a history paper about the origins of the American Revolution. We don't only think in words. Visual spatial reasoning is an equally important area of development. This type of thinking involves understanding images in space, such as being able to detect visual patterns and analyze spatial relationships. If you have ever put a puzzle together, you have used both visual deductive reasoning, looking at the picture on the box to figure out where all the pieces go, and visual inductive reasoning, collecting all the corners and gathering all the pieces with blue and white to make the sky. There's more good news. Now your son can think about thinking. This is called metacognition, and it will allow your teenager to evaluate his own thoughts as well as the conclusions of others. A child has only one frame of reference, his own. He's at the center of his universe, not because he is selfish, but rather because it's the only way he can look at things. As far as he's concerned, his teacher exists only when he can see her. At the end of the day, she hangs herself up in the classroom closet until the next morning. With adolescence, however, comes perspective and the ability to put oneself in another's shoes. This new capacity to see things from another perspective opens the door to empathy and self-awareness. From this newly acquired vantage point, your son is now able to consider how others view him. So when he questions your logic in grounding him for missing curfew, remember that he's just taking his newfound abstract reasoning skills out for a spin. While you are holding firm to the consequences, appreciate how smart he's getting. There are now whole new worlds for your son to ponder. Politics, art, even spirituality. One of the reasons I love working with teenagers is because they are so passionate about all of their new ideas. They are capable of intellectual conversation. Do not worry too much about the conclusions your son may draw in this new stage of development. Critical thinking has just begun for him. Ask your son's opinion on world events or the book he's reading in English class. He may even have something interesting to say about his favorite video game. A new sense of right and wrong. The capacity for abstract thought allows your son to make progress in another sphere, moral reasoning. The sense of right and wrong develops along with the child. For little kids, morals are a matter of cause and effect. Young kids follow the rules to avoid punishment. Gradually, children develop an inner and moral sense. In the beginning, they strive to be good children, friends, or classmates in order to win the approval of others. The next step, which usually emerges in late elementary and middle school age children, is an understanding that the whole community benefits if everyone follows the rules. The pinnacle of moral development is a very abstract idea, the social contract. This contract is based on the concept of the common good, that every community member must sacrifice some personal freedom to the central authority, which in turn sets customs and makes laws to protect the rights of its members. Under this contract, everyone benefits. Many of these concepts are not fully grasped until well into one's 20s, and some adults never get there. We often mistakenly presume that a child has achieved the moral maturity of an adult by his teenage years. According to Michael Thompson, by 8th grade, 50% of kids still make decisions of moral consequence based on whether they will lead to punishment. The vast majority of teens know the difference between right and wrong. The rules they live by, however, may sometimes differ from yours. Risks are justified in the teen rulebook because that's how they learn things. In this brave new world of autonomy, teens feel a right to their own power, and they are interested in testing its limits. They may defy your rules or advice, not because they lack values and morals, but rather because they are reserving the right to sort out things for themselves. For the time being, I know it feels like forever, but it will only last a few years. Your son's moral code is determined by the group of knuckleheads he hangs out with, not by you. A teen's morality often dictates loyalty to his peer group rather than to you, or even to the society at large. At this stage, he'd rather be a good friend than a good boy. That's just part 1. I'll read part 2 on a different video. Hope you enjoyed.